today we're going to be doing the wrap-up of March 2021, and we're going to be doing all the books that I read, lots of graphic novels, lots of romance, which is unexpected for me, and some just wonderful other things along the way. So first we have Spider-Man Life Story that takes place the 60 years of Peter Parker if he had have aged from 1962 until 2018, 2019, whenever this came out, and it was so good. I especially loved the look at Vietnam and how he would have thought about the responsibility of being a college student and being someone who has responsibility and has duty but doesn't agree with the system of oppression that is happening with war, and looking at Cap as well there. And we have Cap going in and just being like, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it. I just spent so many years being a soldier in World War II, and now it's a war I didn't even believe in. And he's just like, nope, I will not fight for this. And then he's just like going in between defending everyone. I don't know what happened to Cap during this time. I'm pretty sure Steve was on ice, but I think that that had all of the beautiful retcons during that, so I'm not sure what the original thing is, but it was super wonderful to see. I didn't like love clones, you know, you have to have clones because that's a big part of his past, but like it got messy somewhere in the 90s and 2000s, and I was sad we didn't see as much as Miles as we could have, but like in the end I really enjoyed it and I thought it was great. I would have like loved different renderings of how his life would have gone, but I still enjoyed the one we got. Second, we have 3 stars to Ain't I a Woman. This is by Bell Hooks, and she published it in 1981, I believe. And it is one of the like huge Black feminist books about kind of white feminism and how it doesn't appreciate, doesn't actually help women of color and women with other who are lower class or women who have disabilities and stuff like that, although it doesn't touch as much on this. In February I read Hood Feminism, Notes from the Women You Forgot, and I feel like that's a wonderfully like updated version of this. I really liked it. I thought that it is better for a historical thing. It deals a lot with like how slavery and like how women were treated then, and it definitely gives a really good show of what it was like to be a woman in the 70s and 80s who was Black and dealing with that. I feel like a lot of the things in it are not as relevant today as it is now, although obviously I'm not the person to speak on that. But it was super interesting, but I thought the conclusions weren't always things. And she really didn't like lesbians. Like how some lesbians have definitely treated people of color, especially like trans women of color and stuff like that. I totally can understand that. But like she was just like very against it, and also like said that men never experienced sexual violence during slavery, which I don't need stats to know that that is like definitely wrong. Like homosexuality and fear of that definitely did not stop men from abusing other men, and that was kind of her conclusion, was just like people were so scared of being conceived as gay that they would never have done that. And I'm like, I don't think that. As a huge work in history and classic, I think that is really useful and really interesting, but there are other books that are more on the Black experience and womanhood and what it means to be a feminist and how white feminism has kept women from color from being fully and their thoughts and their needs highlighted in other books, specifically Hood Feminism, which is amazing. Anyways, second we have The Dark Designs by, I think this is James Damian 5, and then we also have The Joker War. This is 10-11 issues of the current Batman run where we kind of go through and watch the things. I liked it. I didn't absolutely love it. I gave him all 3 stars, but I enjoyed it. And then I read Infinite Frontier, which was the kind of like 100 pages, I think, of, might not have been 100 pages, that seems long for what it was. Anyways, it's just like the intro to their new omniverse of DC. I didn't rate it because we were just kind of going in and out of the worlds. We had some really cool moments and really things that I'm excited to read, and I enjoyed it. It's hard to rate something that was mostly just like an advertisement. Next we have Girl, Girl, and Girl by Kenya Hunt, and this is a book that is by her about the experiences of being a woman in a Black girl magic era, and especially about a lot of experiences about being American who is living in England and being an expat and stuff like that. I thought it was really interesting. It has a lot on the fashion world, which I didn't know very much about, so I found it hard like cluing in, but I thought it was super interesting, and it's one of those books that I felt like so many things take place, like the Bell Hooks, and I'm like, oh, that's super interesting, but it's taking place and looking at how things were in the 70s and 80s, or so many books that look at things. This looks so much at like the time era when I was growing up in the 2010s and like now, and it just felt very contemporary and it felt very now. And even at the beginning, like she was finishing it up during the beginning of COVID, so like she included elements of that as well. So it felt very much like I could relate to everything and that I actually knew what the heck was going on. And one of the last essays, because she has some from her like circle of friends and stuff like that, and one of them is by Candace something. Anyway, she is the author of Queenie, which I've been meaning to read but haven't, and it was about the experiences of becoming famous and people like self-imposing their views of what the character is onto them. And there's something that John Green says. There's a quote that he quotes saying, "We are writing our own autobiography but in code." And then he said after like he published Turtles All the Way Down, he had like a mental breakdown because he felt that people thought that they knew the code and that they were employing things that he wrote in characters on himself. And that's very specifically kind of what she's talking about. And I thought it was super interesting and made me even more excited to read Queenie and not read her. Have Locker Room, and this is by French artist and illustrator and author, and he writes about a memoir, fictionalized version, autofiction, about his experiences of growing up and the locker room of boys being like open and like, oh, I remember the awkwardness and the uncomfortability of locker rooms and everything around nudity or my body as a teenager still, somewhat to this degree. And I cannot imagine that being a boy, in which like showering and like them being called like stinky and gross and like emasculated because they're not, if they don't shower, and judged really harshly if they do, and their bodies is just so fully available. And about bullying and the treatment of boys, whether it's body image or things. I thought it was going to have, because it dealt so much with people being like queerphobic and homophobic and stuff like that, that I thought they were going to explore that, and they didn't. But I thought it was really interesting, and it is a book that needs to be talked about more, because I definitely use this as a teenager, but I think that especially boys get less conversations about bodies and how they view themselves at that age especially. Then we have Punchline, and this is the initial one-shot view of the new character in Batman lore, and I thought it was really interesting. I liked the way that it was conveyed and the new take on it. I find it hard to talk about comics sometimes without getting into them, but I thought it was really interesting, and it's a court case and she's kind of dealing with the stuff from Joker War, and she's really using technology and stuff like that to her advantage, and I thought it was interesting, and I'm interested to see where her character goes because she's a new one. And then we also have the Joker, which is the initial one, and I really liked this. So he gets his like one of his first ongoing series. I think he had one in the 80s or 90s, and this is his second one, and that one was canceled really badly. But this, rather than looking at Joker, we actually look at Jim Gordon and how much Jim has been affected by the Joker, like his son dying and Barbara being paralyzed and all of these experiences of fear and frustration and stuff like that, rather than focusing on him, because he's, you know, a very, very evil man. As much as he is charismatic at times, he is very evil, so it can be very hard to be like, okay, this is our protagonist, because then he has to do something. But rather than looking at a different character and looking at how Joker affects him, it becomes a really interesting story. And then we had a Punchline backup in there, which didn't give me enough to actually want, like, I want to continue, and that's why I that's why I read them back to back, but I did want more of it. Because it's a backup issue, it gets a lot of like very limited time. Next we have What Big Teeth, and I was so excited. This was like anticipated of the year. It's a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood and all the things. It was a big letdown. It, like, the story and the writing was just really amateur to me. On top of that, like, it had like the strangest kind of incest ever. So there's one character that everyone is in love with, including like, so the guy has been immobilized and is just there for their like lust, pretty much. Like, her grandparents both had an affair with him, and his father, and her sister, and her cousin, and like she's in love with him, and he knew her as a kid because he's been immobilized, and it's just like so uncomfortable. And it's like kind of written like their love is all genuine, even though it's like it's one thing. It's another thing when it's like, yes, my father has had, you know, sexual things with this man, so has my grandmother and grandfather and my there's just too much going on, and we need to talk about it. And it was like never addressed. Yeah, it was a lot. Anyways, Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I was excited to read this. I got into a huge romance and read a bunch of this. I wanted to read it because I had chronic pain. I have chronic pain. I have fibromyalgia specifically, the same as her. And I have a review that is going to come up about it. I think the representation was good at times and was lacking in other times, and I'm glad that she was writing it because it's a voice that doesn't need to be heard. But when you have a voice that is such a specific voice that is so underrepresented, it becomes problematic because you need to represent it so well. In the end, I thought it was good and enjoyable, and it was a nice 3-star, the same as Take a Hint, Danny Brown, which I loved. I like this better than Chloe Brown, even though it was something that I couldn't relate to as much. Although she was like a feminist scholar becoming a master's. She's becoming, she's doing her PhD in feminist literature and stuff like that, and I loved it. He loved romance, and he was like dealing with his trauma and stuff like that, and helping men like not have toxic masculinity in sports. It was awesome and sweet and lovely. I really liked it, and I'm excited to read the third one when it comes out. But overall, it was just a lovely experience. And then I read The Bride Test, which is the second of the Kiss Quotient, which I had read last year or so, and I really liked the autism representation. The Bride Test was not bad, it just was not either good either. It didn't have the depth of character or like analysis of the things, and in general, I just didn't overly love it. Like, it was enjoyable when I was listening to it, but it was also like, yeah, I'm ready for this to be over. I got halfway through, and then like a lot of it just miscommunication and all of that. Next, we go to The Proposal, which is the second book in the Wedding Date series, which I also did not read because I couldn't get available, but I wanted to read more romance by Black authors because that's what I was feeling. I was like, I need this. So I read this, and it was real cute. I liked that it had like a meet cute in a way that wasn't like awkward. Like, so pretty much her boyfriend of like 3 months, who's this like actor that has like the normal like kind of just, you know, like douchey, that's not like a word I really want to use, but like douchey dick, kind of like full of himself kind of guy, and he proposes to her after 3 months or 5 months, either way. He spells her name wrong. Like, it's just, it's not great. So the male hero and his sister is like, hey, I'm gonna rescue you by pretending to know you because like camera crews are coming and stuff like that, and then they become a romantic relationship. And like, that is one of the most like I can see myself or like other people doing that, to be like, okay, and then like, you know, I kind of am just this person, like, let's ask them on like a thank you dinner or something like that, and then that going into something more. And I liked that the relationships in this, and I read the third one as well, The Wedding Party, which deals with other characters, and I thought that the characters and integration of their family lives and not as props was actually really, really well done, and I appreciated that a lot. And yeah, I feel similar feelings about The Wedding Party. We have two people who have had miscommunications, and because of that, you know, she's a fashion person, he's in politics, and, you know, because of the ways that they were introduced, she thought he really looked down on her for being into fashion and helping people, being a personal stylist, and she thinks has a stick up his bum because, yeah, because of the comments he made. So they've never really gotten along, but they're in a wedding party together, and they keep on having kind of hate sex. And I thought that the dynamic of their relationship and kind of dealing with their own stuff was really interesting and great, and I liked them. They were cute. How to Pronounce Knife by Suvasan Tamasanga. That's how I'm going to pronounce her name. She is a Canadian Laos immigrant, and she writes specifically about Laos refugees and immigrants, and this was really good. It was a short story collection that dealt with many different things, the name one being knife and her pronouncing it not knife. I think knife. And then the like trauma around that and growing up as that, and I don't know, it's just so well written and so well explored. I really enjoyed it. I rated it 3 stars originally, but like I think it's itching up to 4 like really, really quickly. Then we have Policing Black Lives by Robin Maynard. This is dealing with police brutality and state violence in Canada, specifically looking at a lot about how like healthcare that is paid but it then is in government's hands and stuff like that, how child services and migration offices and so many of the things that we don't think of as being able to commit violence, but because of the ways that they operate schools, things like that, that have different effects on the family and on marginalized groups as well. Looking at specifically Black and Indigenous people as well. It does occasionally look at different other minorities, but it specifically looks at that and looks at disabilities and mental health and all of the things surrounding things that can help marginalization. And I thought it was really interesting. It's like a very dense read, but as a Canadian, I think it's like a very much must read to listen to and learn about the things that, you know, sometimes violence isn't just someone being shot. It can look in, and in Canada that has a lot more insidious, and we like to present ourselves so much as like the home of the free and multiculturalism. Like, you know, I got sat down in like grade 10 or grade 9 and I was like, United States is a mixing pot. They make everyone be the same person. But in Canada, we respect diversity. And I was brainwashed. So, like, learning about how the ways that, even though as we present diversity and we present multiculturalism, how we insidiously look at that is very good and important to know. So I'm running out of space. I have 4 minutes left on the clock, so let's go. We have Absolute Trust in the Goodness of Earth. This is by Alice Walker. The poetry just did not work for me. The preface was incredible. Everything else, it's just, the rhyming, it was all one like word, and it's like I rewrote a bunch of it, and like not like changing the word, just changing the line breaks, and it made so much more sense. But I couldn't read it. My roommate like got headaches trying to read it. Like I just could not read it, and I was like, I wanted more from this. Okay, Magnus Archives season 5. Love this podcast. It's a book because it has 20 episodes of 20 minutes each. It's very long and well scripted and wonderful. Horror podcast. Didn't love the absolute ending, but the rest of the season was incredible. It's hard to hit an ending of a horror mystery podcast and satisfy everyone. Marbles by Ellen Forney deals with her in 1998 and to 2010 when she experiences bipolar and how medication and her moods of manic and depression and how that went. It's a graphic novel and I really appreciated it. I thought it was really well done, even though I didn't always love the art and the depression. For me, who has depression but doesn't have mania, can talk a lot about that and how that really, really spoke to how I did it and how she kind of like looked at artists, looked at art history, and dealt with trauma in that way, which I can definitely relate to. And yeah, I think that if you have people in your life who are bipolar, or you yourself are bipolar, this could be a really good resource. It definitely is a little bit dated because the way that we looked at mental health in 1998 or 2012 when it was published is very different than now, but it's still really good. And then last but not least, Jane. Jane Eyre. I read Jane Eyre throughout the month and I finished it at like 1:30 in the morning after on April 1st, so I'm counting it. And this, I need a whole video and I do not have enough time for that. But I really liked the beginning. I thought the school part, I thought the mental health and the depictions of her mental health and mental state was really, really good. I thought that her as a character was really interesting and really strong. And then Rochester. I liked him initially a little bit better than I expected. Oh, and then he started talking about Bertha and I wanted to punch walls. Like, oh, it was like I did troll him and was just like how like rating hate marks, which kind of like yelling at him in the comics did give me some catharsis, but it was still so aggravating. I ordered Wide Sargo Sea, which is the retelling of her story, and I'm expecting to read that next month or sometime in the next trailer. And yeah, St. John was boring. I found that whole bit boring. I liked that we saw that she was in poverty, even though she was a rich woman, and how people discriminate people based on things. Although, obviously, someone being well-educated doesn't give them more of a right to home or shelter or any of those things. In all, I have really mixed feelings about it. I gave it 4 stars because I really liked it, but I also really hated it, and I need to kind of think through it and write a review for it. Meanwhile, thank you for sitting with me throughout this time, and happy reading and writing, and I will see you next time. Bye!